Delivering Miracles is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families like yours and mine. Download the free network app on any Apple and Android devices and listen to your favorite episodes on the go. Okay, real talk for a second. Plastic is bad for your fertility. I know that sounds super obvious, and you probably have heard this a million times before, but I am shocked at how much research has been coming out recently about how BPA and non-BPA plastics affect things like embryo implantation, the number of eggs retrieved during an IVF cycle, recurrent miscarriages, PCOS, and how it alters DNA in eggs and sperm. It's time to say goodbye to plastic, and I am so thankful to my friends over at Mighty Nest who have made this their mission to help families like yours and mine make this shift as easily and as affordably as possible. I'm totally obsessed with my items from Mighty Nest, and I know you're going to love them too. So head over to parijatdeshpande.com/Mighty Nest to learn how you can easily and affordably replace plastics with environmentally and reproductively friendly items instead. And for all Delivering Miracles listeners, Mighty Nest is offering $5 off and free shipping for your first order of their monthly subscription box, the Mighty Fix. You are going to love it. Head over to parijatdeshpande.com/Mighty Nest to get shopping now. Today's episode is a rebroadcast of one of the most popular Delivering Miracles episodes that has aired so far. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. When my son was in the NICU, he was in the NICU for months. And we knew that going in because we knew how early he was likely to be born, and we were prepared for that. And we were told by our doctors, and I had spoken with the neonatologist at least twice a week prior to him being born about what to expect and what it's like. And they were very good about telling us all this information when he was born and in the NICU. But we were there for months. I mean, the hospital became our home. And I mean, I was there more than I was actually at home. I was there for 10, 12 hours a day. I'd come home, eat really quickly, watch a brainless TV show. I honestly can't even tell you what movies I watched because I don't think they ever really fully registered in my brain when I was there. It's just something to get me out of the hospital world, to help me sleep at night. Next morning, got up, showered, breakfast, out, right back to the hospital. And I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize how alone I felt. I mean, I got it in the sense that it was very clear a lot of the friends or family or community around us didn't understand what it was like to have a baby in the NICU for months. I actually at that time didn't know a single person who had been through it. But what I did realize was that I was alone, and I didn't really understand how alone I felt until a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine who I love to death, told me recently, now we're talking years after the NICU's over, and after he's been home. Recently, she said to me, I want to help you carry your load. And for a second, I thought, well, what do you mean? I'm okay. I'm hanging in. I'm doing all right. And she looks me in the eye and she says, you've lost babies. You had a very high-risk pregnancy. You delivered extremely preterm. You have a kiddo who has some extra medical needs. Yeah, he's doing great for a 24-weeker, but you've got stuff. And I see you carrying it alone, and I want to help you. I want to help you carry that load. And I can't tell you how that felt to hear. I burst into tears because I had no idea that I even needed it. No idea until she took it out of my hands, off my shoulders, and she held some of it for me. And I said, oh my God, I had no idea. So many years later, despite everything that's going on still now, I had no idea I needed it. And so when I realized that and how much it was helpful for me, I started sharing. I don't share with everybody. I don't share all the details of everything with everyone, but I've got a small group of powerhouse women, I'll call them, who know everything, who I can just text at the drop of a hat, who I can call and tell them anything, because I want to have them share that load. Because I've gotten to a place where I'm realizing now that that's not because I'm not strong enough, or I'm too weak, or that I'm helpless, but more so because, hey, you know what? We all need a community. We all need our village. They say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, you know what? It takes a village to support a mom too. And that's why I'm so excited to introduce you to an amazing woman who has such an incredible story to really highlight the importance of this too. And I cannot wait to introduce you to her. Abbi Perets is passionate about showing moms how to have it all. At successfulfreelancemom.com, Abbi teaches mothers how to break into freelance writing and land high-paying jobs while they're at home with kids. As a mom to 5 kids, including one with special needs who also beat cancer, Abbi knows the unique challenges moms face every day, and she works to empower them to pursue their dreams and live a life they love. Welcome, Abbi. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Yes. I'm so glad we are able to chat today. Your story, I mean, I don't have any words. And I'm sure you've heard them all.
But I have heard a lot.
Yes. I mean, but really what struck me was what you made of your life personally and professionally because of everything that you've been through. And I would love to catch our listeners up if you want to share with them a little bit about what your journey has been like up till now.
Sure. So I tend to ramble, so feel free to pull me back on track if you need to do that. That's
you got
totally
it.
Okay. Okay. So when I was pregnant with my 3rd child, I had 2 daughters already, and we were living in Southern California. And I had my 2nd baby in a planned home birth with a midwife. So the opposite of a NICU situation. And I, at that point, I was very complacent in my life. I had 2 pretty much textbook pregnancies. I had 1 baby in a hospital and 1 at home with a midwife. And I really felt like I knew exactly what I was doing and how to be a mom. And then I was pregnant with this 3rd baby, and things were different from the get-go. And I was seeing a midwife and I was planning a home birth, but I don't know, things were totally different with this kid. There were things that in retrospect, I probably should have noticed and picked up on, but I didn't. And the day that I decided I was having the baby, the midwife had checked me in the morning and I was 37 and a half weeks. And she was like, you're a little more obnoxious than normal today. I'm going to go ahead and call this early labor.
That's one way to prepare for delivery, I guess.
I was like, whatever, works for me. And it was, Southern California has sometimes the Santa Ana winds blow, and there can be like these hot winds. Plus there had been wildfires. So the air was full of ash. And I remember this because my husband and I went on a bunch of walks around the block to just kind of get a good labor pattern going. And I remember coming in, and it looked like I had been out in the snow, like I was coated in ash, and just the air being so thick and hot and heavy. So that was the world that day. And I feel like, it all kind of came together. So it's a Friday afternoon, like 5 p.m., prime rush hour time in Los Angeles. And
which means it takes like 4 hours to get anywhere.
Right. And I have the baby at home and everything's fine. The labor itself, the birth itself is fine. And literally within seconds, the midwife is saying, we might need to transfer to the hospital. And I remember thinking, what a dumb thing to say. We already had the baby. Why would we possibly go to the hospital now?
Right.
And she showed us that the baby was having retractions, which is where the chest falls in every time he takes a breath.
Yes.
And she noticed that he was struggling to breathe. He was working much harder than he should be. So she thought maybe he just has something like a little bit of an obstruction. So she kind of poked him a bit to try to make him give a big, healthy cry. And he wasn't doing it. She said, look, it's not like the baby is not imminently going to die, but this baby needs to be transferred to hospital. And it's 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon in Los Angeles. Therefore, we're calling an ambulance. And I remember the only thing I could think of was, I'm naked here. I want to get a shirt on. Like, I want the 911 protocol guys coming in my room when I'm not wearing any clothes. So I leapt out of the bed and pulled on clothing, and they come in with the fire trucks and the ambulance and whatever. And we had to convince them that the baby needed to go to the hospital.
They didn't believe it when they saw how he was breathing?
They weren't looking at that, really. I don't think it was paramedics. I'm pretty sure it was firefighters who got there first.
Okay, so not quite.
Right. Not quite the medical professionals. They were like, well, he's not on fire and he's a baby. So what's the problem?
Right.
Anyway.
He looks big. He looks nice.
Right. That's the thing. Like, his size was huge, and that comes into play later on. So we get to the hospital, and they had strapped my husband onto the stretcher with the baby, and I was walking behind them. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but whatever. So I walk in dripping my little trail of blood.
Oh gosh.
And I've literally given birth an hour earlier. And at some point somebody was like, did you want to sit down? I was like, that might be a good idea.
Maybe. Yeah.
So, be nice. Yeah. Thanks. And so
already this is going completely differently than either of your prior pregnancies and what you even expected for this time. I mean, and even what you dream of for a delivery.
Right. I mean, it was absolutely insane. And I had these 2 other daughters at home who were, I guess they were 3 and 4-ish. And 2 and 3. I have 5 kids, so it's really hard to keep track of their ages, especially what their ages were at some point in the past. I have no clue.
Yeah.
So they were home with my sister-in-law, and I had no idea what was going on. And we get up to the NICU at some point, and everybody's working on the baby, and we're kind of off to the side, not having a clue what's going on. And then at some point, a neonatologist comes over and starts talking to us, and he's like, your baby is sick. We don't know what's wrong with him, but he's sick. This is not a healthy child. And we were like, the bottom just drops out, it's, you don't even know.
It's not what you were expecting at all.
Not at all. We had no idea what was going on. We still thought I don't know, I guess we thought that we were coming into the hospital for a quick checkup and then we'd take our baby back home. And they're suddenly talking about a 3-day course of antibiotics. So I was like, wait, you mean we're going to be here for 3 days? And the doctor looked at me and he was like, I'm thinking more at least a week. And I was like, what? That just didn't even register. I didn't even come to the hospital to have the baby. Why are you keeping me here now? So,
right.
So that was insane. So he wound up being in the NICU 11 days, which I suppose, to mothers of micropreemies, that sounds like I could do 11 days in my sleep, right? But but
hey,
wow.
any day, even one day in the NICU is one day too much. It is so hard. Yes.
It was nuts. I just remember, you talked in the beginning about how that was your home away from home and you spend all these hours there, and and I had these other two kids at home. So it was just this nightmare where I could not figure out what I was supposed to be doing. I was always, in the wrong place. I was barely functioning.
Yeah.
And
you're still healing from a delivery.
Right. There was that. And so my kid, we thought, 37 and a half weeks. So he was huge. Now it turns out what we didn't know then is that my son actually has a genetic syndrome. So genetic means not hereditary. It's not something that he got from us, but his DNA is a little messed up. So it's similar to something like a Down syndrome or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's not Down syndrome. It's a different syndrome. And it happens to be an overgrowth syndrome. It's called Soto syndrome. So my son is physically larger than you would expect based on his parentage. And it's a shame this is a podcast and you can't see. My husband is shorter than I am. So my husband is 5'6". I'm 5'8". We are not like tall people, but my son is 6'1". So
okay.
Right. So back in the day, he was this giant baby who looked like he could eat all the other babies in the NICU.
Well, yeah. And if you think about the NICU, all the babies are usually on the tiny side. I mean, my kiddo was a pound and not even a pound and a half. And so,
right. So yeah, like my kid was like 7 pounds, right? So they were like, It was weird. You'd walk by all these tiny little like fingernail sized babies. And then there's like my football player. But he, he was huge, but he was floppy. He had no muscle tone. You could tell something was clearly wrong. And what I came to learn that in the NICU, there are a lot of babies who are born early, and they are in the NICU because they have to hit their due dates, right? So, and they're early, but there may be issues that go along with that, but sometimes they're healthy, but early. They literally just need to develop and grow. My kid was already full term and something was wrong and nobody knew what. It took us 2 years to find out what was wrong. So
wow.
Every day there were blood tests and every day there were MRIs of his brain, and every day there were people coming in and looking and making very serious faces and then not communicating effectively with us. And, it was just...
What was that like for you? I mean, I can't imagine that was easy on any level. What was your emotional journey like?
I was kind of a wreck, I would say. My husband made me, the NICU didn't really give us a lot of options, but my husband made me sleep at home each night. So I would sleep at home. In the morning, I would wake up. My parents had driven in from Tucson the day after my son was born to help us out. So in the mornings, they would take my daughters to preschool, and then they would come home and take me to the hospital. And then they would sit with me in the NICU. And then my husband would go to work in the mornings, and then he would come at noon. And my parents would leave then and pick up my daughters and feed them and be with them in the afternoons. And then I would stay with my husband in the NICU till like 6. And then he would take me home. He would feed me, tuck our girls into bed, tuck me into bed. And then he would go back to the NICU for another 5 or 6 hours until they kicked him out.
So you had a village too.
I had a village for sure. Desperately needed that village. But I definitely felt like I don't actually remember. I assume that I was just kind of on autopilot. I know a lot of stuff happened in that time and I just don't remember it now. So yeah.
I can really resonate with that too. You just kind of do what you need to do to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And it becomes almost this robotic motion.
Like my mom was there. So she, like a couple times a day, she would feed me and she would literally have to like hand me the food and say, take a bite, chew it, swallow it. Because I wasn't like, I was just whatever. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get it together. And then when they finally released him from the NICU, it was with no special instructions, but like, I spent the next 2 years kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like something's not right here. So, we got him developmental therapy and physical therapy and occupational therapy and then speech therapy later on. Although I do remember when people started saying, your kid really needs speech therapy, I was like, why? Our daughters never say anything that we actually enjoy hearing. Maybe I'll just leave this one quiet. So people did not take well to that.
I imagine not.
So, then we got to this point where Adi, my son's name is Adi, but when I talk about him in the NICU, he hadn't yet been named because my family is Jewish and we don't name the baby boy until there's a brit, and there can't be a brit until you're healthy enough to have the brit done to you. So anyway, so when I think of him in the NICU, I think of him as not having a name. Anyway, now
that
he has
is
a name,
really
right?
Interesting. I wonder, does it feel like there was just like a baby in the NICU that's a completely different entity than the baby you had at home?
To an extent, yes. The nurses were furious that we weren't calling him by name, and they made us they thought we weren't attaching to the baby. And I was like, wow, it's completely not that at all. I'm very attached. So it definitely, today I look at him and I can't even, it's weird. It's weird. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And what really struck me when you and I were talking before the podcast, this episode, was you talked a lot about this grief and this anger that you were carrying around with you, even after he came home and even after you figured out what was going on. Can you share a little bit about what that was?
Sure. So, number one, I felt definitely that I had been robbed of the experience that I wanted to have. I was really excited when I found out that I was having a boy after 2 girls. I had certain dreams and visions, and then it was like they were suddenly and abruptly taken away from me. And I definitely, there's all this guilt. I was at first, because I really didn't know what had caused all of this. And I was like, did I do this with the home birth? Is it because I insisted? I don't know, there was a lot of that. But then as he got older, and there were clearly delays, and we were treating what we saw. And then when we hit that stage where we got this diagnosis, and I found out that this isn't something he's going to outgrow. This is something that my kid is going to live with forever. This is something that is changing our family forever. I was furious. I'm not quite sure.
You didn't sign up for this.
No, not even a little bit, and then, the hallmark platitudes that people, God only gives you what you can handle. I'm going to punch you in the face.
That one.
I'm going to punch you in the face. See if you can handle that. God gave it to you, right? So I guess you can handle it. You may have picked up on the fact that I don't have a lot of friends.
You've got a friend in me right here. I am loving this. I can really relate to everything you're saying.
Oh my gosh. I just, and I live in a religious Jewish community. So like in that world in particular, people are like, oh, God only tests the people he loves. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, bite me. Okay. I'm not doing this.
Yeah. Yes.
So I try and you might have picked up on the fact that I have a somewhat dark sense of humor. So, and I can be just a little bit cynical. So I would say things to people like, they'd be like, wow, I don't know how you do it. And I'd be like, well, we tried to return him to Target, but they keep saying that he's not from there. And people would be like, okay.
I can really relate to that. That is how my husband and I cope too, through infertility, through the high-risk pregnancy, through the NICU, and even now, that is how we cope, because it is so much better to laugh, even if it's dark humor, than it is to sit in the corner and cry all day long.
Absolutely.
So I really get it.
Having tried both, I would definitely pick laughter anytime. So,
yes.
So there was this grief and there was anger. I was exceptionally resentful for many years of other people's neurotypical children. And that felt somewhat insane to me because I had several neurotypical children of my own, and yet I still felt that other people did not deserve to have neurotypical children because in my somewhat biased view, they were not special people or by any means who deserved healthy children. Like it just, it was, I was so angry. I was so angry. And it took me a very, very long time to start to let go of that anger. And it was not helpful when people would say to me, you should really let go of that anger. It's going to be easier for you. And I was like, thank you. I hadn't thought of that. Like,
right. Let me try that for a change.
Right. So, it was really, I just remember carrying around so much anger. And for me,
did you share this with people?
So in the beginning, I did not. It was something that I carried around, by myself. I was listening to one of your episodes earlier where you talk about the I'm fine lie. And I felt like, wow, yes, that speaks to me, because for years that was me. I did that. How are you? Oh, I'm fine. And I even wrote, at the time I had a semi-anonymous blog. And I wrote a whole thing about how, I would pretend to be okay. And because if I knew that if I showed up to carpool line, like, with my hair not brushed and still in my pajamas and whatever, like, people would definitely notice. And I also felt, if this were a temporary situation, like if we had some sort of terrible disease, then people would step up and help us. But because this is our life, this is our always, like, who wants to come to you and say, you know what, Abby, every Tuesday from now till the end of time, I'm going to take a D. So you don't have to worry about Tuesday afternoons from now on, because that's on me. Nobody, people, it's not that my friends are bad people. It's that's a big ask. I mean, like, that's a big deal. So
yes. And there's a sense of fatigue almost from loved ones. Yeah. Because what you're going through is so hard. Right. And this is something, for those of you that are listening, probably sounds really familiar, because I have said this over and over before. And there's an entire episode actually that I'll link in the show notes about how this is really as hard as you feel it is. And it doesn't say anything about the people around you. It really does reflect, though, that what you're going through is extremely challenging. And so much so that even your closest, your most loved ones can't commit to this lifetime of whatever this is, like you have to. It's hard. It is really hard.
It is. And my story is, somewhat insane, in that when I finally got to a place where I was able to start telling people, I mean, I decided at one point that my mental health mattered more to me than other people feeling uncomfortable. So, I got to a point.
Hold on. Can we just repeat that for a second? That is freaking awesome.
Thank you.
My mental health mattered more than making other people uncomfortable.
Correct.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
So I embraced that. And I got to the point where people would say to me, are you okay? And I'd be like, no, I'm not okay. Yeah. My kid has, a malformed brain. I'm never going to be okay. And I started talking.
Good for you.
Thank you. It was a big turning point for me. It was, it was acknowledging this and being okay with the fact that I was angry and that I was sad. And really, I'm not a fan of like all the woo woo and whatever, but it really was standing in my truth. It was owning that. It was saying, this is me, this is who I am. And I'm not ashamed of that. And I started telling people too, I take antidepressants. I'm sad a lot of the time, and I'm trying to get past that. And I guarantee that there are some people who didn't have their kids come over to our house. I'm sure of that, but that's okay, because I don't want, if I could help one other woman know that it's okay to ask about taking antidepressants, to me, that's a big deal. So
absolutely. Because I think this turning point that you're talking about that I know so many of our listeners are yearning for really comes when you allow yourself to accept what is.
Right.
this is freaking hard. I hate it.
Right.
This sucks. I don't want it for myself. I don't want it for my family. And that's where we are.
Not wanting it for my family too. I remember one of my terrors in the NICU as I'm sitting there not knowing, what's wrong with my kid in the NICU, but I was thinking of my oldest daughter who, had this whole like personality and was my first kid and the one who I hung out with for, almost 2 years. And I was thinking one day she's going to say to me that, XYZ isn't fair because she has this brother with special needs. And I'm going to have to tell her, you're right. And I was so scared of that conversation. And I mean, I have my daughter today is 18 years old and she's amazing, amazing, amazing. She's also a pain in the ass sometimes, but, but she's amazing, amazing, amazing. And she has never once said to me, it's not fair. Never. So I got really
That's
lucky.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I would guess, I know we haven't met in person before, but I would guess that the reason for that is because you've allowed that space for them to experience their life as it's changed.
I think
and really experience that.
I think that's really important. I have a good friend who I lucked into meeting, who is a psychologist. She and her husband each have a sibling with Down syndrome, and they met through a support system, whatever. And she's a psychologist, and her doctoral thesis was on the effect of having a child with special needs on siblings in the family.
On siblings.
And she told me that in families where they're open and they talk about it and they say, this is who we are and we're not hiding this from anyone, then the kids do fine. And it's in families where it's like, we're ashamed of this and we don't talk about this and our family has a problem. That's where you have kids who have issues and who can't, because they grow up knowing, because they're taught something is wrong with our family.
Yes, absolutely. So. That is such a great point, and that's very, very true. Absolutely. So what would you say then to our listeners who are listening in going, God, I want that. I want to get to that place where I'm okay with telling people that I'm not okay.
Right. So
what would you say to them?
It takes courage. But it also takes a certain amount of, what's a nice way to say this? Like it takes a certain amount of not caring, what other people think. So, it's really, for me, it was about setting the example I wanted to set for my other kids. I wanted them to know that it was okay for them to be angry and sad and to feel things. And I couldn't honestly let them know that if I wasn't also in that place. So for me, I started really trying to change the outside and hoping that making an external change would kind of spark an internal change. And what I mean by that is I tried to start behaving the way I wanted to be seen, and hoping that would kind of spark some kind of, some sort of systemic internal change inside. And it helped. It took a long time and, it was definitely a process. And I don't know if there's one good way to get to that place. And look, again, I'm human. And like I said, my story is insane. And when I finally got to a good place and I was feeling good and I was feeling good about God, I told you I live in this religious world and whatever, and I was having a very hard time being a part of that.
Sure, of course.
I was feeling good about my kid and his prospects and my other kids and their lives and my family. And then the same kid, my D, he was just a month before his 10th birthday. It was 2013, Friday the 13th, and he was diagnosed with leukemia. And it was
my gosh.
It was like thunder, on a bright sunny day. Like the air just gets sucked out of the room. And I remember when I was telling my closest friend, she was like, her first reaction was exactly what mine had been. Why a D? And we both immediately said, it shouldn't be any child, but come on,
sure.
Come on.
Yeah. So, he's been through enough.
It was mind blowing. And that was when I really lost it. I have to say that was when I really So, okay, so now I'm at this point where like I've gone through all the whole NICU, I've gone through the special needs, I've gotten okay with that. Now they tell me my kid has cancer, and literally, and I could not make this up, if I tried, a week later, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh my gosh.
and then I fell apart. Like I remember my parents telling us on the phone about my mom, and I just lost it. And then my mother, now, okay, remember, this is my mother who's just been diagnosed with breast cancer, who went to the gym every day while being treated for cancer because she's freaking insane, okay? I mean, if there was ever an excuse to not go to the gym, I'm fairly certain that chemotherapy, that's the excuse, right? So, like, my excuse is, oh, it's Tuesday, I'm not going to go to the gym. So, like, right. So, anyway, my mother says to me, you know, Abby, you can always talk to God. And I said to her, you know, Mom, I don't think he wants to hear what I have to say. and she said to me, tell me something. Do you think you're so special? Do you think he hasn't heard what you have to say? Really, who do you think you are? And I was like, okay, you win. I mean, it was like, you know, my mom, and she had cancer, and she was the one telling me this. And I was like, all right, fine, you win, you know? So I started the dialogue, but I feel like I'm kind of like a teenager with God. Like when he does what I want, I'm like, whoa, thumbs up, hugs emoji, you know, work your cups. And, and then when he screws with my kid, I'm like, dude, we're not even like, I don't even know who you are. I don't.
Right.
But my mom was like, you know, you can scream and you can yell, and that's okay because he's heard it all before. Like, there's nothing you can say to him that he hasn't heard. And that did stick with me a bit, and it helped. It also helped that my kid lived, quite frankly, and that my mom lived. I don't know where I would be right now.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. You know, we were very, very lucky. We went through... Yeah. I mean, I really lived in the hospital that time. All the days that I didn't spend in the NICU, I spent on the oncology ward.
Oh my goodness.
And it was definitely, you know, it was months on end, and I had 4 other kids at home at this point. And my 18-year-old daughter, who I mentioned before, who's amazing. She is amazing, but I will share that after Adi was better, at one point, she wrote me a letter to tell me that she was certain that period was difficult for me, but she did want to let me know that I was a terrible mother during that time. So, it was really, really sweet.
I mean, I'll tell you, as a mother, that breaks my heart to hear. But as a therapist, I'm going, way to go, daughter, for communicating that so well.
I know. What I've done is I took it and I read it and I heard it, and I was grateful that she felt that she could say that to me. And then I saved it and I said, you know what? One day she's going to have a teenager, and I'm going to come over and I'm going to say, remember this?
Remember this.
So so
oh my goodness.
It was.
And how did you maintain your ability to stay connected with people through all of that? Did you go back to that I'm fine phase?
I definitely did. I had been out of the I'm fine phase for years. And then all of a sudden I was definitely not capable of, functioning like a normal human being. And people would be like, how you doing? I'd be like, no, I'm fine. And I would get everybody out of the house in the morning, and then I would sit down and cry on my kitchen floor. And this is even after my kid was better. That was the worst part to me, is that, my kid was better and he came home and he went back to school. And everybody assumed that I was better. And I was like, oh, I am so far from better that it's not even funny. I mean, I'm like...
Now is when you actually start to do the work.
That was
once there's safety built in, once you know the baby's okay, or in your case, the older child is okay, and that's when it starts really hitting you hard.
I was a wreck, an absolute wreck. I mean, when I... think back on that time, I can't even, I look at pictures from then and I see it. I see how I don't smile, I have a lot of selfies with my kids during that time, but you can tell I'm not really smiling in them. I'm not, I'm not really there.
Yeah.
And it was I remember that whole period kind of fuzzy. Like it was just so dark. And
Yeah.
I literally, I'd get everybody out the door in the morning and then I would just collapse on the kitchen floor and sob and sob and sob and sob and sob for hours. And then I'd get cleaned up like right before they'd come home from school, and pretend to be normal again. And I probably did that for several weeks, I would say.
Yeah. What pulled you out of that?
So it's actually really interesting. So prior to Abbi being sick, I had worked as a freelance writer. I had done it for, like 15, 18 years, since I had my first kid, really. So 15 years. And I had always worked from home. I had always been freelance so that I could be around my kids. And obviously when Abbi was diagnosed, I had to shut down everything immediately. And so afterwards, I certainly wasn't in a place where I could handle clients. That was just not going to happen. But I started thinking, I need to do something to get outside of myself. And, when you're depressed, they tell you like, smile and you'll start to feel better, or help somebody else. And so I thought, what do I know how to do that would be helpful to anyone else? And I thought, okay, so the thing that I know how to do is I know how to build a freelance writing business, how to get started, and how to do that even when you have a whole bunch of kids around. So how to do that on a scaled back schedule from home when you might only have 3 or 4 hours a day and you can't be putting, 8 hours a day into building a business. But that was something that I knew how to do. And I started just kind of creating content around that. And writing has always been my way of processing and whatever. So creating content was very natural to me. And the teaching side and the helping other women get started was insanely exciting to me. And I tell people, I started Successful Freelance Mom in February of 2017. So it's only 9 months old. And I tell people that this business is what got me up off the floor of my kitchen. This business saved my life.
That is amazing. You found your light.
I did.
And you let it guide you. That's amazing. Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
It has been the last 9 months. I tell my students now, I only do things that bring me joy. And I'm serious about that because I know what darkness is. And I'm grateful. I'm very lucky to be at a place in my life where my husband has a very good job and I can allow myself this freedom to experiment with this business. And it's not like I'm relying on this to provide for my family's food and shelter. So, I'm very lucky in that sense, but I am only doing the things that bring me joy. And I am encouraging them to adopt that attitude in their own work, where it doesn't mean, just go out and eat cotton candy all day. But don't waste your time on clients or work that isn't meaningful for you. That's not, that's not feeding your passion.
It's not worth it.
No, it's really not.
It's not worth it at all. That is incredible. And those of you that are listening, I hope that by hearing her incredible journey, and I know we didn't even scrape the surface of everything, but just got a very 30,000 feet view of what happened. But those of you that are listening, I hope what you're taking away from this is really an acceptance of yourself, that it's okay to not be okay. And it's really okay to allow yourself to have a village to keep you together, to help you get back up and to help you find that light.
Absolutely.
Abbi, what are your final words of hope for women who are in the thick of it right now and are still in that I'm fine phase and are still struggling to find that light and build that village? What are your words of hope for them?
My words of hope, I would say you have to choose joy on a daily basis. You get to make that choice. This is going to sound really weird, but I have an obsession with the show The Walking Dead. And it took me a while to figure out why do I like this show about zombies and apocalypses so much? And I figured it out finally. And it's because the people in the show live in this post-apocalyptic zombie world, right? But they have to choose life every day. If they want to give up, it's really easy for them to do it. They can literally just walk out and get eaten by a zombie. Done. You're dead. So they have to wake up every day and choose to live. That's, it speaks to me. So joy is a choice. You get to choose that on a daily basis. And I would say that, even in those darkest times, you can find those moments of joy, and they can be really, really simple. I mean, before my kid could speak, and it took years before he spoke, it would be when he would reach out and put his hand on my cheek. And that was amazing to me. So, you can find those moments of joy, but you have to choose to find them.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And that could not be a more perfect way to wrap up this episode, because it is so powerful and it is something we can do no matter what's going on. So thank you for sharing that and for sharing your incredible story with all of us. I so appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. It was really important for me to be here.
Yes, we appreciate it. And where can people find you if they want to learn more about the work that you do?
Sure. Visit successfulfreelancemom.com. If you're interested in freelance writing at all, I've got a free 5-day email course that you can take right there on the site. I've got a blog full of information and exciting things. And in general, if you just want to connect with me and talk about kids and NICUs and special needs and pediatric cancer, I'm very reachable. You can find me at Facebook /Successful Freelance Mom. And, all the places, some variation of either my name, Abbi Perets, or Successful Freelance Mom. Everywhere except Instagram, because I'm too old. I can't figure it out. I tried.
Well, thank you again so much, Abbi. And all of this will be linked in the show notes. So for those of you that are listening, you can have easy access to reach out to Abbi as quickly as possible. Thank you again so much, Abbi.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
I am this close to tears right now. And if you could see me, you would see that. It's so refreshing to me and so healing to me too, to hear somebody share their story so openly. And for me, I'll be honest, hearing that somebody else has spent hours on the kitchen floor sobbing makes me feel better. Not because I want that for her, but because I now know it's not just me. And it's not just you either. I know how lonely it feels when you are fighting for your baby's life, when you don't know if you're going to ever be able to take your baby home, when you don't know if that dream life will ever happen for you. It's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to allow yourself to have a village to help pick you up and to help you find your light. You deserve it. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And if you loved this episode as much as I loved chatting with Abbi, I would love it if you can head over to iTunes or Google Play and leave a review so more women who are going through infertility, a high-risk pregnancy, or have a baby in the NICU, or are raising a child with extra needs can tune into Delivering Miracles so they can also listen to these inspirational stories and receive advice and guidance on how to get through some really dark times. And if you're experiencing pregnancy complications right now and you're worried about delivering early, or you're feeling really anxious about what's going to happen, I want you to check out my free webinar that's on my website at parijatdeshpande.com, because by watching it, you'll discover how to overcome your fear and anxiety so you can stay pregnant as long as possible, even if you're facing pregnancy complications. Also, I would love to stay in touch. So follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Parijatdesh. That's Parijatdesh. I say it all the time, and I think it's just because we need to hear it. You are not alone. As lonely as this feels, as isolated as you feel, you are not alone in those thoughts that you're having, in those moments on the floor when you're sobbing, those times in the car when you're driving through tears, those nights when you can't fall asleep because your mind won't shut off. You are not alone. We are here with you. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do this.